What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats as well as some excellent attachment combinations for every gun in Black Ops 6. And in today's episode, we're finally moving into the LMG category, and we're going to start off with the PU-21. And diving in first, as always, let's get into our damage profile, and with this gun, it's going to be a 4 to 5 shot kill to the body, depending on the range. However, with our default headshot multiplier, if we mix 3 headshots in with body shots at any range, it will reduce the number of shots to kill. Or we could use the CHF barrel, which now makes it 2 headshots required in order to help and reduce the number of shots to kill. So that is a reasonably effective attachment, especially if you're specifically going for headshots. After that, let's talk about rate of fire a little bit. And the first thing to point out is all of the LMGs in the game currently have a pre-fire delay. This means every time you pull the trigger, there will be a short delay before your first shot is even fired. And then every shot after that, as long as you're holding the trigger down, will not have this delay, of course. And in the case of the PU-21, this pre-fire delay is roughly 60 milliseconds, keeping in mind that's hand-tested, and when we're looking at really small values like that, there is some room for error, but it's roughly 60 milliseconds. And our rate of fire is 750 rounds per minute. What this means is our raw 4-shot time to kill potential is 240 milliseconds, which is really fast in this game. However, this excludes the pre-fire delay. If you want to get your realistic time to kill in most situations, you would add that 60 millisecond pre-fire delay, which gives us a more realistic time to kill potential at 300 milliseconds, which is still not terrible in this game, but it's not amazing by any means. And just keep in mind, I am going to keep time to kill values separate from pre-fire delays, just because I feel it is important to have that little bit of nuance, because if you're already holding down the trigger and you're transitioning from one target to the next, for instance, you're not adding your pre-fire delay in that case. Also, from the enemy's perspective and how long it takes for them to die, that's going to be more along the lines of your raw time to kill, because in their case, they don't feel that pre-fire delay, because they don't notice they're taking damage till they're already hit. So always be aware of that pre-fire delay in combination with time to kill, but I will be keeping them separate through all of my LMG videos. But circling back, as for headshots, if we do manage to get that 3-shot kill up close by mixing 3 headshots in by default or 2 with the CHF barrel, we now have a raw time to kill of 160 milliseconds. As for ranges, that 4-shot kill range will extend out to about 46 meters, which is the worst in the LMG category right now, but honestly, that is still an incredible range profile. That's going to be way better than most assault rifles, for instance. And it's pretty easy to keep yourself within that range on most of the maps in this game. Also, our bullet velocity is 700 meters per second, which gives us a hit scan range at 35 meters. And as a result, if you are going to be using a barrel to boost either range or bullet velocity, I would go for either the gain twist or the reinforced barrel, because as you start to get out beyond 35 meters, the limiting factor starts to be your bullet velocity, not the range value itself. And then finally on this graph, I do want to show with rapid fire, just like with many guns in the game, this will be reducing your range and your velocity values by 10%. As for hardcore, we get a 1-shot kill to the body in its maximum damage range, but beyond that maximum damage range, it will be a 2-shot kill to the body or a 1-shot kill to the head. And also, it's worth considering, most guns that have a 1-shot kill have a 0 millisecond time to kill, whereas this gun technically has more like a 60 millisecond 1-shot time to kill due to that pre-fire delay, and that makes LMGs often not a great choice in hardcore unless you're planning on just like spraying through a bunch of cover and trying to get kills that way. But then let's move on to Hipfire, and LMGs have horrible Hipfire in this game, as expected. However, in saying that, the PU-21 is the best out of the LMG category here. That doesn't really mean much though. You still probably don't want to be hip-firing with this gun unless you're like point blank range and have no other options. Then after that, let's talk about recoil a little bit, and with this gun, the recoil is fairly manageable. What I notice is with the first 4 to 5 rounds, there's a bit more recoil with those initial shots fired, and then it settles in and they're grouped a little bit more tightly, and it has a general shape where it starts kicking up and to the left, and then it will cut right fairly hard after about 10 rounds fired. Overall, as long as you're not challenging extremely long gunfights, the default recoil on this gun isn't too bad. It's very manageable. Also, as expected, with the CHF barrel and rapid fire, both of these attachments will be increasing our recoil by a very noticeable margin, so something to be aware of. Next up, let's get into our handling stats. And of course, with an LMG, we expect these to be much slower than most of the guns in the game. Our aim down sight speed is the fastest in the LMG category, but still very slow at 435 milliseconds. Then when it comes to our sprint to fire time, it's bang on average for an LMG and not great at 245 milliseconds. And then finally, for our slide to fire and dive to fire times, these are equal across all of the LMGs at 410 milliseconds for our slide to fire time and about 490 milliseconds for our dive to fire time. Of course, like I said, these are quite slow values for the game, but that is expected out of an LMG. Another thing that's expected out of most LMGs is a very slow reload time, and that's exactly what we get here with the PU-21. Our reload time with our default magazine, which is a 75 round magazine, is 4.97 seconds. That is quite a long time. In saying that, we can speed this up drastically by using either Fast Mag 1 or Fast Mag 2, which will obviously reduce our capacity, but they will give us reload times that are more along the lines of what you'd see with an assault rifle, which is really nice and often what I like going for, especially because these also help with your handling and mobility stats. Or you could go the opposite direction and go for an even bigger magazine, but of course that's going to slow your reload time down, and they will also hurt your handling and mobility stats. So it's really just a balance you need to find and figure out what you want to do with the particular build that you're creating. And then finally, for the base stats of the PU-21, let's get into our mobility stats. And just like with handling, it's expected that these are going to be slower than most of the other guns, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. For all of these movement speed stats, they tend to be right around average for an LMG, and that is to say that this gun moves around the map quite slowly by default. And especially with that aim walking speed, that's very, very slow, and that means once you aim down sight, you're going to be practically locked in place. You're not really going to be able to strafe effectively in a gunfight unless you use some attachments. And that wraps it up for all of the base stats. However, there is one key attachment here I wanted to cover, and this is the Crossbar Attachment. This is an underbarrel attachment that's on all of the LMGs, but it is unique to LMGs. And with this, it removes your ability to fully aim down sight and become fully accurate, and instead you get a much tighter hipfire-like spread when aiming down sight. This will also drastically improve your aim down sight speed and your aim walking movement speed, but it will add vertical recoil, and then of course you're not going to have precision when firing your gun. There will be a lot of randomness mixed in there. And it's quite a fun and interesting attachment. I'll definitely be sharing a build with that in just a little bit. But before we get into that build, let's start it off with my preferred build with the PU-21 that suits my playstyle the best. This is my aggressive stealth build. And with this one, I'm going to be treating it more like a slow handling assault rifle than anything else. So I am planning on still getting around the map, maybe just a little bit more carefully than I would with an assault rifle. And with this one, we're using the Kepler Microflex optic, the suppressor, the Ranger foregrip so I can increase those sprint speeds, as well as reduce my horizontal recoil a bit. We have the Fast Mag 2 attachment, which gives us a 30 round magazine, but a 1.8 second reload time, so it performs much like an assault rifle when it comes to this. And then we're topping this off with the ergonomic grip, which will get our aim down sight time down to 350 milliseconds. That's still fairly slow if you're comparing it to like an assault rifle, for instance, but it's a drastic improvement over the base. And this also helps with our slide to fire and dive to fire times. And with all of this combined, this just makes for a nice all-arounder if you are planning on getting around the map a little bit and not just posting up on a location and locking down a lane like you would typically be expected to do with an LMG. As for the next build I've got for you guys, this is my Gunfighter build, which does make the gun a lot more versatile in this case. So with this, we're once again using the Kepler Microflex, the compensator to help a lot with vertical recoil, the reinforced barrel to boost our range as well as our bullet velocity, the vertical foregrip to give us the best possible horizontal recoil control, the extended mag 1 attachment to give us a slightly larger magazine so we can just post up and spray without having to reload as often. Then we've got the quick draw grip, which gives us the best possible improvement to our aim down sight speed from the rear grip attachment. The infiltrator stock, so we can actually strafe a little bit back and forth in gunfights. It's not going to be crazy fast, but you'll at least feel less like you're locked in place when you're aiming down sights. And then finally, we're topping this off with recoil springs. So we actually have a very accurate version of the PU-21 with this particular build, and this will allow you to treat it like a traditional LMG, hanging back, picking people off at long ranges, and doing so with a lot of confidence while still opening up some versatility to get around the map. Maybe not quite as aggressively as the previous build, but you can get around a little bit at least without taking 400 plus milliseconds to aim down sight. And with that one out of the way, let's now move into our crossbar build. And with this one, we're using the suppressor to stay off the radar because we do want to be able to close that distance, maybe flank our enemies a little bit, so that's going to help there. We obviously have the crossbar attachment itself, the CQB grip to help a lot with sprint out time, slide to fire time, and dive to fire time, since we are going to be a lot more aggressive with this style of a build. We once again have the infiltrator stock because that actually stacks with our crossbar aim down sight walking speed, and we get a very respectable aim walking speed at 3.6 meters per second. And then finally, we're topping this off with rapid fire just to give us a slightly better time to kill potential. Also, we are going to be missing the odd shot here or there since we don't have the precision of fully aiming down sight. So we want to make sure that if we are missing the odd bullet or two, it's not going to be as punishing for us. And with this one, we get a very good quote-unquote aim down sight time. We're not fully aiming down sight, but we get fully tightened up into our minimum spread when aiming down sight at 200 milliseconds, which is quite impressive. Our sprint out time is also very impressive for an LMG at just 175 milliseconds. and I do find this to be quite a fun change of pace to be using with this gun, especially on these smaller maps if you insist on using an LMG. You might be wondering why I didn't use a laser attachment to improve hipfire spread, and the main reason behind this is that's only improving hipfire, and you shouldn't be hipfiring with this. We're trying to get aim down sight, and the moment you start aiming down sight with this, it's tightening that spread up very quickly, so we don't need to hipfire in my experience. And with that, that's going to wrap it up today's gun guide on the PU-21. As for my thoughts on this gun, while I have been able to find some success with it, I can play with it just fine. It's totally usable. I do consider it to be the worst LMG in the game right now, and I'm not really a big fan of it. I don't like using this gun, but I can use it. I can perform reasonably well with it. Now, of course, those are just my opinions, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about the PU-21 in those comments down below. And if you guys have missed any of the previous gun guides, we've covered all of the SMGs, assault rifles, as well as marksman rifles in the game. I will leave a link to the playlist down below. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.